The meeting will come to order. Welcome to our August Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting. It's great to see everyone present today. Today marks our first CAL meeting of the 24-25 school year, and we're excited that our school year is off to a great start. A special word of thanks to our teachers, staff, and school administration, as well as our central office personnel for a great school beginning. Thank you also to our superintendent, Dr. Royster. He was certainly very visible on the first few days of school. Seemed to me when I was looking at Facebook, he was everywhere. I'm just not sure how he managed to be in so many places. Dr. Royster, you're very much appreciated for that visibility.
Thank you, Dr. Stahl.
The Board of Trustees and I, we're honored for the opportunity to be with you today and for the opportunity to get back to serving the students and the families of Greenville County. At this time, our Vice Chair, Ms. Mosley, she's not with us on the stage, but she is joining us remotely, and I just wanted everyone to be aware of that. Our first matter of business is approval of the consent calendar. Are there any corrections to the minutes posted on our Committee of the Whole session for June the 11th?
Motion to accept the minutes as presented.
We have a motion from Ms. Leventis Wells to accept the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. Our second matter of business is appearance of visitors, and I do not believe we have any visitors today. So we're going to move right along to our third matter of business, which is instruction. Our first instruction item is 3.01, revision of board policy KNBA, complaints about instructional materials. Dr. Royster, I will turn this over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. This comes to you as a recommendation from the administration, and also it was passed forward to the board from the Instructional Materials Subcommittee of the board. Mr. Webb can address any questions you have, but this simply brings our policy, KNBA, into line with the newly passed regulation of the State Board of Education. Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. And I gave a summary of the changes to board policy KNBA at the committee meeting. And Ms. Doolin, do you have any comments you want to share prior to me kind of doing that summary again and kind of going through a PowerPoint that I created?
Thank you. When this ad hoc subcommittee was initially formed, one of the goals that we had was to come up with some definitions to assist the district and the review committees with what constituted inappropriate content. And the state has come out with their own definitions, so we did not have to reinvent the wheel. And we will be using the State Department's definitions, which come from South Carolina law. So I think Mr. Webb's presentation will give you a good idea of what we've been working with. But
all right.
Thank you.
So I want to first start off by saying that the revisions to policy KNBA incorporate all the requirements contained in the new regulation that was enacted by the legislature earlier this summer. 95% or more of the content of the policy is pulled directly from that statute. There are a couple areas, and I will highlight those as I talk. Within our policy that we have a little discretion. It's limited, but we have a little discretion in a couple of areas. So I will highlight those as I talk. But a couple big salient points is that this regulation preempts and takes priority over any other school district process throughout the state that was originally enacted or originally in place. So this preempts everything. All school districts must incorporate these procedures locally. The regulation emphasizes transparency to the public, to the parents, to guardians, and we'll talk what that transparency looks like here in a few moments. In order for instructional materials to be available to students, they must be age and appropriate and developmentally appropriate for that student. It's going to be individualized depending on the grade, the age of the student, the maturity of the student, and the material must also be aligned and supportive of the instructional program of the school. And like I said earlier, it creates a statewide process not only for the transparency, but also for complaints by parents and guardians. And a big part of the regulation is that all decisions by the State Board of Education, when it gets up to the State Board of Education, if they affirm or pull a book or material, then it applies throughout the state, and it's binding throughout the state. Even if it originally started out in one school district, it would be across the board. All right, so before we launch into the complaint process and some other kind of meat of the regulation and the policy, one of the key questions, what is an instructional material for purposes of the regulation and the policy? And it's a broad definition. It is a broad definition and regulation, and it's listed there in full, but ultimately what it is it would be library books, material, both in the digital format or hard copy that's either in the media center, made available to students, or in the instructional program. And so that would encompass pretty much almost everything that is provided to students during the school day. So it's a very broad definition. All right, what is age appropriate? Again, it's going to be an individualized analysis to determine what is age appropriate for a student. This is guidance in the regulation that talks about what age appropriate would be for a particular student, but you look at the cognitive, emotional, behavioral capacity of that student or that student's grade level. Now, here's a big component of the regulation. It says clearly that if something contains sexual conduct, which is defined in state law as 1615-305 C1, then that is automatically not age appropriate for that student, okay? If it contains descriptions and visual depictions of that sexual conduct. So again, that's important. We're talking about descriptions and visual depictions of sexual conduct. This is, if you can read it on your screen, 1615-305 C1 is a laundry list of what would be sexual conduct as defined in state law. I'm not going to read it to you because I will blush, but I'll let you look at it here for a second. But that is the statute of what is sexual conduct. All right. So then in regulation, the General Assembly also provided guidance, additional guidance of what is age appropriate. And it's really a 5-factor criteria test. One would be the academic and educational rigor of the instructional material, the educational significance, the validity, accuracy, objectivity, currency, and appropriateness of that material, the availability of space both in the library and also in the classroom is also a consideration to be considered. It's sort of a totality of the circumstances when you use these 5-pronged tests and analysis. All right, so the regulation does not require school districts to go into the media center to remove, or I shouldn't say that, review, I should say, current material. Now, certainly school districts, including Greenville County Schools, has had a screening process to review material coming in. We have certainly, as you know, addressed prior complaints and concerns. And certainly if there is an issue with instructional material at any time when a parent brings that or guardian brings that to the attention of the principal or media specialist and employee, the school and that employee working with academics and district administration and superintendent can look at that material and always pull it, remove it, if it's not age appropriate and doesn't meet this regulation. But the regulation really focuses on screening the new material that comes in as ordered or that is put into a media center. All right. So that is important to keep in mind, that we're largely talking about as far as screening new material. and the complaint process and concerns existing material. Transparency. Transparency is a fundamental concept in this regulation. All right, so what is required by this regulation, and again, this is all incorporated into the revisions of policy KNBA, is that there must be a current and complete list of all books in libraries in a school district. And then also there is available upon reasonable request a list of all instructional materials used in the classroom. All right, so two big components of transparency in the regulation, and that's also obviously incorporated into our policy for these revisions. So the complaint process. All right, so it starts off, and state law is clear now that a parent guardian who has a student in the school district has the ability to bring a complaint. All right, but they have to have a student within a school of our school district. They can bring a complaint. That number of complaints, the frequency, is limited to 5 a month in the regulation. But before they bring a complaint, this is in the regulation, they have an obligation, a good faith obligation and effort to try to resolve their concerns at the school level prior to filing that complaint, okay? And again, I can't emphasize this enough. If someone brings a concern about a book or material and the principal finds that it's not age appropriate and that is an easy question and there's sexual conduct, for example, obviously we will have measures to try to prevent that from ever coming into our school system. But if for some reason something inappropriate comes in, the principal can remove prior to going to this complaint process. So I just want to make sure that's emphasized. All right, but what does this good faith effort look like? It's not defined in regulation. And so what we have done for this policy, and this expands the regulation to some degree, we have created a process to make sure that this good faith effort is done with fidelity. And so what it looks like is we're going to have a form that a parent completes. It's an instructional review form for a school panel to be initiated. This school level panel will consist of the principal, our administrator, media specialist, teacher, academics department representative, and 3 parents. 3 parents from SIC or PTA or school support organization. All right, so that is going to be formed. Again, this is when there is a question about the material. The low-hanging fruit of something that's objectionable, principal might have already removed, and this might not be needed. But when there's an actual question, this panel is formed, and they will review that material, read it, look at the concerns of the parent guardian, and issue a written decision within 21 days. 21 days. If that written decision is to remove the material, the superintendent has the ability and discretion to remove that material district-wide, or could just restrict it for a certain age level as well, depending on the circumstances. All right, so if the parent and guardian's concern is not resolved through that school panel after doing the good faith effort, then that parent guardian can file a complaint pursuant to this regulation. That complaint is provided to our board chairperson, and the regulation allows a local school district, a local school board, to send that complaint initially up to the State Board of Education. That State Board of Education has the ability and discretion to accept jurisdiction of it and review. They don't have to, but they have the ability to do so. And so how I have initially structured this policy, and as I discussed in the ad hoc committee process, is for us as a school district and you as a school board to take advantage of that opportunity. I think there are some advantages to do that for as time-wise and resources. I also believe that if something is truly possibly inappropriate, it gives the State Board of Education a quicker opportunity to remove it statewide. So I think there are some advantages to that. But the State Board of Education does not have to accept jurisdiction, like I said. So if they were to deny that and send it back to the school district, to you, then what does that look like? Similar to what has been done in the past, there will be a public meeting. All this would have to occur within 90 days, by the way. The whole process is 90 days once you get a formal complaint after that good faith effort. So there will be a public meeting where the complainant and other interested members of the public could share information for support or against that complaint and the keeping or removal of that instructional material. The board at that hearing, that meeting, I should say, must make a decision. It would be a vote, majority vote would prevail, just like any other or most votes of the board. And then a written decision would be crafted within 15 days, working with the board chair. And you know, I've received the question during the ad hoc meeting on this is, what would that process look like? I think there's some flexibility in it, but typically a board chair would work on it. I would help support. And it could be that the actual decision letter would be voted upon by the board, depending on the circumstances, but there's some flexibility on that process. Then if the parent guardian is interested, that parent guardian can appeal that decision to the State Board of Education for review. That State Board of Education would then hear it and decide whether it's appropriate and whether the Board of Trustees made the correct decision in implementing the regulation and the criteria to determine if it was age appropriate or not. And then that decision would be binding once the State Board of Education made that. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. I said this at the ad hoc committee meeting the other day. But when that complaint is possibly sent back down to you from the State Board of Education, you have the option in the regulation to have an ad hoc committee of at least 3 school board members. It would only be school board members who would serve on this ad hoc committee, who would review the material, make a decision on the material, and create a report and recommendation to the full board. So the full board would still vote. It would still be that process, but I have not incorporated that mechanism in this policy. From my view, and in talking with several of you, and obviously this is up for discussion today, I think the process of possibly the State Board of Education reviewing it first, and if they didn't, sending it back to you, there's some merit of all 12 of you having that first initial comprehensive review all at the same time. So that's how I drafted this policy, and have not put this ad hoc committee process in there. A decision by the board applies to all schools. So if you were to make a decision, then it would apply across the board to all schools for that age level. And so this is sort of a miscellaneous kind of catch-all last slide that I want to talk about. The State Board of Education can decide a book on first instance. So it doesn't have to go through a school district. If a parent raised a complaint or they were concerned about a material or book, how the regulation is written, it appears the State Board of Education can just accept and create jurisdiction over that material and review it in first instance and possibly remove it statewide. So it doesn't even necessarily have to go through a local school district. The regulation is clear that for all reviews and all analysis of instructional material and a book, that the review must focus on the content of the book and the material. It cannot focus on a viewpoint. There's more scrutiny legally, constitutionally, when there's any sort of regulation on a viewpoint versus content. So that is specific within the regulation. And there is enforcement procedures by the State Board of Education here. First violation is a warning to the board and or to the employee who was involved. A second violation, if it's willful, reckless, or intentional, again, a very high bar to meet, then there's possible ramifications for that employee or for the board. But again, a very high bar, and ultimately there would be a public hearing by the State Board of Education to discuss that, to review that. But again, that's only for those intentional, willful, kind of reckless violations by a school district. But that is also in the regulation. So that's my overview. Happy to answer any questions that you have. I will say that Mr. McCoy and I and others in academics, assistant superintendents, have rolled out this regulation, completed a lot of training, obviously a lot more training to come on it. Some of it we've had to wait to bring this to you to make sure that we knew the finalized process, but we've done a substantial amount of training already. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Webb. That was a great presentation. We have a recommended motion from the administration to approve the revisions to board policy KNBA as contained in version 2. Do I have a maker of the motion?
I'll motion to approve the revisions to board policy KNBA is contained in version 2.
I'll second the motion, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Doolin, and thank you, Mr. Sailors. At this point, before we vote, does anyone have questions? I think, Mr. Sailors, I know you had a question.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. Doug, you touched on my first one, and that is, how are we transitioning and transmitting this information from this discussion to those in the classroom or in the school that are having to deal with this on a daily basis? You mentioned your training, so.
Sure. So we've spoken to principals about this. Mr. McCoy and I have met with media specialists a few days ago regarding this. There's been a lot of written material, summaries provided that I believe are pretty user-friendly for teachers. So ultimately, we have a lot of processes that we've already rolled out, communicated, answered a few questions here and there from teachers who have questions. Certainly, there will be more going forward just to make sure that this is properly implemented. For example, we're going to have the retention and storage of instructional materials is important under this as far as transparency. So if there's a parent guardian who requests a material or a list of material, then we will have that readily accessible to provide. So, some of this we've waited for its process for the board to review, but obviously a lot of this we could already launch into, and we have. So, Mr. McCoy can answer more questions about training, but we've taken some very significant steps already.
Jeff, you got anything you want to add?
I'll just add that when we trained the principals in the operational meeting, then they've gone back in turn and trained the teachers, gone over the regulation with the teachers for the classroom parts in the classroom that matters, the instructional materials, keeping the list, inventorying classroom library books, those types of things. So we have a ongoing Q&A form that they can complete. So they've been completing, questions that they may have specifically, goes on that form, and then we respond back with those questions. And we'll release a Q&A document to principals and teachers some point in October once we get a good spattering of questions coming back from the teachers and principals.
Okay, thank you.
To add to that, to facilitate the cataloging of all that material, as you can imagine, the number of books in some classrooms, particularly elementary classrooms, or at the secondary level, English language arts classrooms, social studies classrooms. We've already had discussions with Follett, and we've been able to add a cataloging system consistent with the one we use in media centers. We're providing, I don't know that they've come yet or not, but we've ordered a scanning device, an additional one for each school, so they can literally go through the classrooms one by one and read off the barcode on the books in the classroom, or if it has an ISBN number. Now, if it was before I don't know, 1960. They got some really old stuff. They'll have to hand enter that, but that should speed the process and relieve the classroom teacher of at least a considerable amount of time in cataloging the resources that they have in their classroom.
Thank you. And then one other one, just for clarification, Doug. The official complaint process can only be instigated by a parent or legal guardian, not an average member of the community.
Correct.
Although they can offer commentary when needed and appropriate, it has to be instigated or initiated by a parent or guardian.
That is clear in the regulation, correct.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Ms. Doolin?
Thank you. Is the 90-day window for the board to review material, is that negotiable?
It does not appear so. It is specifically in regulation that 90 days is there. Now, with all of this, the State Board of Education could possibly issue additional guidance or parameters. Obviously, this could be revised. This regulation could be revised down the road. So there could be some more technical assistance given to school districts about timelines and things of that nature. But right now, the regulation is pretty clear that 90 days is a requirement.
Okay. I think that currently our policy says that the review has to be at the next board meeting, which sometimes only gave us a week. So 90 days seems, I mean, 3 months is a long time to have it out there. So I wondered if we might shorten our policy to 30 days or 60 days, depending on when our meetings fall, because 3 months is really kicking it out there.
So just something to keep in mind, and certainly there's some flexibility within that 90 days for the board to consider, but there's really no way to know for certain right now how long, if the board chair and the board made a request for the State Board of Education to review, the turnaround time that they might decide not to review it. So, they not foreseeable that they would sit on it for a while, but they could take a couple weeks for them to decide whether they will review it, and that would push back your timeline and affect you. So, my recommendation, for whatever it's worth, is to keep the 90 days. Certainly, the board chair would work to be as quick and prompt as possible, but that would at least give you that flexibility.
Is there a form or a way, like you mentioned that parents can appeal to the State Board of Education first without going through the school or through the district. Is there a form already? Is it online, or where would a parent find that?
I don't think the state has created any such form, and again, I'm not positive what the State Board of Education will do on the first instance aspect. There's some language in the regulation that permits them to do that. How often they will take advantage of that or what they will do is to be determined.
And one thing that came up in our ad hoc meetings was that we don't really like to put more work on school staff. And so we talked about if there was an opportunity for an opt-out for principals, if they do receive a complaint and it's graduation month or state testing or just so much is going on, is there a way for them to opt out and send the review to either the district or to the board?
Under this process, I would say no. I think that we have been very cognizant, working with Dr. Royster and Mr. McCoy, to create a process that should not, hopefully, be too burdensome to the school. Will be a little bit additional work, perhaps. Again, I would hope that we would not get too many of these complaints. If we do get concerns, a lot could be resolved without having the complaint process, potentially. But it would be spread out among our 85 or so schools. So I think in talking with principals, I have not heard a concern about workload or this being a burden. I think they've been very receptive to the idea that they would have some skin in the game as far as the review itself and be able to address and work with the parent and guardian.
My last question. Dr. Royster, you mentioned that teachers are going to need to catalog their entire sets of their classroom library books? Or
Any
whatever?
instructional material they have in their classroom, yes.
So in my children's classroom, that's just shelves and shelves, because, you know, my kids are little and they have
Yes.
early readers, thousands of those little books.
Okay.
That is not a requirement that came from us or from you. That came from the state.
That is absolutely correct.
So we did not ask for that.
Did not impose that on our teachers, no.
Is, in the process of doing that, is there a scanner that you can use for those?
Yes, we are purchasing additional scanners. You can actually use the one in the media center, but we are purchasing another scanner for each school. And we're providing them some level of clerical support temporarily, additionally, to help them with that task.
So, I mean, entering it manually seems impossible. No one has time for that. But if you could scan it, just boom, boom, boom.
Yes, that's our plan.
Is there a timeline? Does it have to be this year? Does it have to be this month? Like,
Well,
when
this-
is that due?
It's in effect
in
right
effect.
now.
So,
So from a practical standpoint, that's obviously not practical.
So have you offered teachers a grace period to say, could you do this by Christmas? Or,
We have not established a timeline yet. For one instance, we're waiting to see, should there be additional clarification from the state? There has been no additional clarification to my knowledge, Doug, Jeff, to my knowledge, unless you all have seen or received something I haven't, beyond the regulation went through. So what's contained in here is simply the regulation.
I will say there has been a summary provided by the State Department of Education, but on those kind of pieces of the process, no clarity on that.
thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Doolin. Ms. Middleton?
Thank you. So I am, Doug, I'm looking at the new statute, I guess, 1615-305. When did this come into being? Did we have this before? The statute is very explicit in what it talks about,
It
which
is.
I think is interesting. Obviously, I don't think anybody would want books that are like this. It's like Hustler magazine or something, coming into is pretty clear, I think. But when did we get this new?
So this
law?
statute has been in existence for a long time, and it's really more of a criminal-based statute for its dissemination of obscenities and material. And so what the state has done here this summer through this passing of this regulation has taken just one piece of this statute, or as the definition of sexual conduct, and incorporate that definition on an existing statute over to this regulation and for policies for school districts. So the law itself has been around for many, many years. I don't have the exact year, but it's many decades to my knowledge and recollection. So that has been in existence, but it did not apply to school districts prior to this regulation, in the sense of library books.
Okay, so this is new to our schools. So there would have been no knowledge of this before when we had our previous committees and we looked at some of these books that we have been talking about in the past. This is new.
That is new. The criteria.
New for us.
The prohibition is completely new. Prior to this, you had some case law from the United States Supreme Court, some Circuit Court of Appeals that provided guidance, not to get too much in the weeds, but you had a plurality opinion from the state, or from the South Carolina, from the United States Supreme Court. And, there was some question of what was the standard. But this regulation is pretty clear on what the standard is, at least as far as sexual conduct. And so that is, to answer your question succinctly, is new. That is correct.
Okay.
Doug, I think it's an important note to make, and you did mention it. This is a section of the criminal statute. There is a subsequent section that provides additional clarity as to how to make the judgment as to what falls in this definition. That was omitted in the regulation. If you go back to policy KNBA that existed before this time, I believe it would be correct to say, Doug, that that policy reflected the other section of the criminal code. For example, it talked about literary, taking the whole context of the literary value. There's a whole section about it. I don't remember how many different considerations there were. So your previous policy that would have been passed, maybe originally back in the 80s, but subsequently amended, reflected the criminal code that existed and still exists to this day. This regulation, again, takes that one section, I believe it's section C1.
C1, correct.
Of the criminal statute, but omits, I don't know if it's the following section or a later section, that provides guidance that directs, because it's a criminal statute, that would direct law enforcement and direct solicitors' offices as to what's an actual violation of the criminal statute.
So, in essence, we're talking criminal if someone violates this statute.
Well, let me be clear.
Sort of?
So let me be clear, and that's a good question and good point that I should emphasize here. This regulation is not a criminal regulation. So if a teacher, a school media specialist runs afoul of it, then there are not criminal penalties for violation of this regulation. Now, if they were to actively disseminate what would be considered pornography, anybody for that matter in society, could have implications of the criminal statute. Again, as Dr. Roysters mentioned, you have a much broader criminal statute that is well beyond just 305C1. So I want to be clear that our teachers, as long as they're acting in good faith and proceeding with this regulation, should have no concerns whatsoever about any sort of violation of the criminal statute that, again, just a piece of is brought into this regulation.
I do remember this from my background in law enforcement. This has been around a very long time, but now it's being put into the schools to help us to make determinations about books. Is there any change to, like, other books that may not be to this level, okay, just other books that have some sexual content that will be up to the discretion of what I think or what someone else thinks or what opinions are, that parents can, do we still have the system in place that parents can opt in or opt out, or they can decide if kids can read some of these books? I'm not talking about these books, because these books are obviously forbidden by the state, but I'm talking about other books that I guess don't quite meet that.
So,
if that makes sense.
There's certainly that ability, even if it does not meet the sexual conduct definition, then you fall back to the age appropriateness, right? And so parents can raise concerns by this regulation and our policy, KNBA, determine if there's something that's age appropriate. That's, if it's inappropriate, but doesn't rise to the level of sexual conduct. So there is still that process for parents to raise the concerns with the principal initially. Perhaps if those aren't addressed or resolved to their satisfaction, then you would have the school panel and you go through the entire process. So that is still there to raise the concerns, even if that does not fall within the sexual conduct prohibition in there. So I do just want to be clear that we're almost to some way talking about two different things. Sexual conduct, if it meets that definition, that's an automatic prohibition. It's gone.
Right.
If it doesn't meet that, but there's a question of whether it's age appropriate, then they can still file a complaint pursuant to this policy.
But if there is an age appropriate question, and can parents still, like, and I'm talking about books that are just in the library just for casual reading, not in the classroom. Can parents still like opt in and allow their kids to read some of these books if they're in there?
So
Or is that gone?
for assignments, you have a board policy that talks about parents having the ability to opt out of certain assignments. They would have to get an assignment of equal academic rigor. That is a policy that you have. Certainly that would be a conversation that the principal would have with the parent to talk about what their concerns, and it would only apply to that one student and that one assignment. So there is still some flexibility in that with the school working with that parent.
Okay. So parents can still like have rule the day in essence, if there are books, not these books, but if there are other books that might be, I don't know, classics or some other things that they feel have some comments in them that they wouldn't appreciate, I mean, or that they do appreciate, that they can have their kids read those books if they want to.
There is
Or opt out if they want to.
That is correct. There is some flexibility for parents to raise concerns and opt their specific child out of an assignment if they have personal concerns related to that. That would be outside this process, correct?
One more question. As far as, I noticed on the last section E, medical procedures, things like that. I mean, of course, you know, we teach biology, we teach sex ed. I know it's very conservative in South Carolina, but will any of these kinds of information on reproduction or anything like that, will anything like that be caught up in this, do you think?
So I do believe we should get additional guidance from the South Carolina Department of Education, Board of Education, regarding some of these topics as far as biology and things of that nature. I do think, again, we're talking about visual depictions of sexual conduct. So when we're talking about body parts and things of that nature, generally speaking, that would not rise to sexual conduct, right? It would just be of anatomy or something of that nature. So for the most part, it should not meet that definition of sexual conduct.
It's very comforting. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton. Dr. Presley?
Thank you. Doug, first of all, to you and all of the folks at the district, thank you for the work that you've done on this, for the clarification that you've given us. I have a couple of quick questions. Our external entities that donate books, and we've got some amazing, community entities, what types of support will be given or guidelines will be given when they're donating books to our schools and our classrooms? Have we tackled that?
I think it's fair to say they will be given this policy. They'll be given our specific parameters. Of course, we will also, to the extent possible, screen that material as well. I don't know, Mr. McCoy, if you have anything else to add to that.
What we've told the media specialists particularly, because they kind of normally handle that within their school, is that they would need to still vet everything coming in. So, we're working through some of those things where they have larger volumes and quantities, just how to do that, or, do we need to continue to do that in some cases when it's a lot to vet? There's more than, because this process really that we've set up is more than just a precursor. The process we've set up, as you know, is more looking at each book, reviewing each book, doing that. So they're working through how to do that, or if we need to continue those practices as far as larger donations, how we're going to handle that. So they're working through that. But the one-offs, the box of books that comes into the media center, they're going to use that same process, take it, review it, just as though they were purchasing that book.
Right. I know that this is a lot, and it's also a quick turnaround. I just want to say for the record that 1615-305, and I know it was culled out of a particular thing, but I feel like it's a blessing in a way, because it is going to enable us to very quickly identify some things that are just totally obvious. And the board, we reviewed 4 books, and I tell you, I'm still reeling from it. It would have saved us a lot of time. So this is a good thing, this part of it. And I feel like as we're moving forward, this will move some of this to the side very quickly. So when we do have to talk about age appropriateness, and perhaps something rises to the level of the board that's tied to a literary classic or something like that, it will give us the time to thoughtfully, if it comes to us, handle that. So again, I just want to thank you all for all the work that you've done on this, and I think we're in a pretty good place as long as we can support our teachers as they vet all of these things and our media specialists, because it is a lift, and I do want to acknowledge that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Presley. Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. What's the timeline from the state as far as when our new policy has to be in effect? I realize you said, of course, at the moment, we're just obviously following the policy, but.
I'm not aware that they have actually said that it must be in place by a certain date. It is in effect now. So my best practice as a lawyer for the school district would be to put it in place as soon as possible, reasonably so.
Can somebody explain to me, just in a kind of clear to follow manner, what would be the process from beginning to end? So for instance, parent has a concern about a material, and let's just say, I know it could be in the classroom, it could be in the library, let's just say for the moment that it's in the media center. So they have a concern, who do they go to first? What happens immediately after that? And how does the process step by step go forward?
Sure, I'll take it, and then obviously Mr. McCoy or Dr. Royster, if you want to fill in any gaps that I missed. But sort of a flow chart, verbal flow chart that I'll give you, is that the parent would raise concerns, whether it be media specialist or to the teacher, depending on if it's classroom or library. That employee would then go speak to the principal. There would be a meeting or a discussion between the principal, perhaps the teacher, media specialist, and the parent to talk about the concerns, talk about the content, if it's appropriate or not. As I mentioned before, there would be an opportunity if something is obvious, if it's something that contains sexual conduct or something that's truly inappropriate. I mean, if it's something for a first grader that's clearly not age appropriate, something that's designed for, a fifth grader or older, then that's low-hanging fruit. The principal can remove that, working with academics, working with the district. Now, if there's truly a question, the principal's unsure, they think that there's a valid question of regarding whether it's age appropriate, then that's when the school panel is formed. The parent would fill out and complete the, I think it's Exhibit 2 in this policy, the instructional review form. That form, would detail what concerns the parent had. That panel would then meet to review. Panel would have 21 days to review the material. Obviously, they would look at the regulation. They would look at the policy and determine if it's age appropriate. And they would render a decision one way or the other. If they were to remove the material or agree with the parent guardian, that material would be removed at that particular school. That decision by the panel would be communicated to academics, would be communicated to Dr. Royster. The administration will have the opportunity to remove it across the board at all schools, or potentially just at certain age levels, grade levels. And so that's how that would look if the school panel decided to remove the material and found that it was not age appropriate. If the school panel found that it was age appropriate, again, that would all be in writing, as the rationale behind that decision. Then the parent could file a formal complaint on the form that was created and designated by the State Board of Education. That form would then be provided to the board chairperson. That board chairperson would then contact the State Board of Education chair, request for them to review it. That State Board of Education chair and the state board would consider that request, and if they reviewed it, then it would be up there. It would be with them. If they sent it back down, then you as a school board would have 90 days from the time they filed the original complaint to have a public meeting about the material. And that meeting would look like similar to what has been done in the past. The complainant would be present, other parties, who could share their thoughts and input and feedback. And then the board would have to make a decision at that meeting, regarding the age appropriateness of that material and whether it's educationally suitable. And if the board decided that it was age appropriate and issued that written decision 15 days later, then that parent could appeal the decision to the State Board of Education. If you were to grant and decide in favor of the parents' concerns, then it would end there. And it would apply across the board to all of our schools. So that's my verbal flow chart. I don't know if anyone wants to add any pieces to it. All right.
When does the appeal process go from being a discussion, like you said, with the parent and the principal and a teacher or two or the media center person? When does it officially go from that to being a matter of public record?
So FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, would apply throughout the entire process. Now, there are some exceptions and caveats to certain things as far as unreasonable invasion of privacy. All of that would have to be considered depending on circumstances and things of that nature. But public records obviously apply, and FOIA, First Transparency, applies to it. So it would always apply. Certainly it would apply at all, anything provided to the Board of Trustees, anything that you submitted in response, that would all be applicable under the Freedom of Information Act. The regulation's clear that the public meeting must be conducted under the Freedom of Information Act for all the transparency procedures. So all of it's very transparent, certainly case by case with anything that might be not provided to the public. But again, the sort of default is everything's made public.
I heard to get a little more specific, from a couple of parents who were mainly concerned about, they have a discussion with their child's teacher or their child's principal, but kind of when does it get to the point to where they have to put their name out there, I guess at that point when they make if they decide to challenge the decision of the school.
That's correct.
Going back to that list that you mentioned earlier, where the district has to catalog the books and materials, I've also received some questions about online resources that are available through the Media Center and perhaps in other cases. And there was a lot of concern about those. Will the online resources that are available through the Media Center and perhaps other venues, will they also be cataloged?
It is school-sponsored and made available by the district, even if it's through a third party, then yes.
I really think, personally, I realize we can't go back through. I think I've heard Dr. Royster mention before that, within the entire district, there's maybe over a million different titles and that could possibly be in existence within the whole system. And so obviously at this point with the school year starting, I know we can't go back and vet all of that material. However, I really do think that there should be some vetting of material. And I think that would save a lot of time and effort and a lot of people, 7 different people, from having to spend a good bit of time reading perhaps really large books as the 4 that came before us recently. And some of it just really doesn't seem that difficult to me to come up with. I think, for instance, and there could be other avenues as well, but if you take the list that's just on book looks, Now, those folks aren't, as a matter of fact, I think in their materials, they say they are not for book banning at all. They are just providing information about what kind of material, and very much of that material, I think, goes and aligns very closely with what the state has given us as a definition of things that should not be there in our schools. And I think we should start with a list like that. I don't think it would take that much time for our media center people to look at that list. Anything that is given a rating of 4 or 5 on that list, not that it should be immediately pulled out of our schools, but I think it should be certainly a red flag that this is something that we probably should take a look at. And again, you don't have to take their word for it. I realize with different editions, it might not be on the exact page that it's listed on BookLooks. In many cases, it is. But I think you go there. It's not that hard. I have at least one of the books that we had that when I had went through just early on to try and kind of get a feel for what might be in there. And you go there, you look at it, and it says on page 767. Well, if it's not page 767 in your book, again, with just a little bit of effort, you can locate it and find out that, yes, this is in here, and it's word for word, and it clearly violates the state policy. And I think at a minimum, for our parents, we should go through and take a list either through BookLooks or something very similar, and take a look at those books. And I think we could probably very quickly figure out that some of those books do not align with the state policy, and we would save ourselves a lot of time and effort, and would get rid of books that the state says should not be there. Also, going back to what Ms. Presley said a few minutes ago, it seems to me we certainly, at a minimum, we should send out an email to our main book vendors and make sure they have the state criteria, and inform them that we do not wish to receive any books that do not conform to the state's requirements. And if they just continue to send us book after book after book that does not conform to the state requirements, then I think probably we would need to maybe call them up and have a little more of a conversation, and that would also take care of a lot of this process, I think. Also, with the panels, I know we had this discussion when we were meeting in committee, but I definitely have some concerns about the panels. I think I see the reasoning for why we have them. On the other hand, I think it's hearkening back to the committee system that we had prior. I know, as Doug mentioned earlier, you know, we have a process where it would first have to go through the principal, and the principal could stop it, or the teacher could at that point and decide that we need to get rid of the material. But, you know, we had a similar process before where it could go through the school, and then it could go through the district could look at it. And then at that point, if the district sent it on, it could go on to the committee we formed. But that whole process was not working. I mean, we had situations where it made it through the school, through the district. It then made it to the committee. The committee met. In some cases, the committee chose by margin of like 10-0 to keep the books. In other cases, maybe there was one person on the committee that dissented. And yet, when it came before the actual school board, the first 3 votes, if my memory is correct, were 9-1, 9-1, 9-1 to not keep those books. And the other vote, I think the most recent one, was 9-3 that the book should be removed. So it doesn't seem to me that process was working, and this seems to be, the panel seems to be kind of a similar situation. I know that, you know, with the makeup of the committee, or with the panel, it seems to me too, you know, I think if I remember correctly, there's going to be an administrator on the panel. Well, you know, just kind of human nature, I think if your head principal has already looked at this material and did not make the decision to get rid of it, then I think as an administrator under that principal, you definitely are a bit concerned about going against your principal. Your principal didn't decide to get rid of it. Now you're on the committee. Also with the person who is the media center person, in some cases it's older material and they probably had absolutely nothing to do with that coming into the media center, for example. In other cases, if it's more recent and they've been there a while, then, they probably originally had made the decision to put that in, and maybe they had a good chance to look at the material closely, and maybe they didn't look at it all that closely, but in any event, they had basically made the decision to allow that in. And while we have them on the committee, and I guess you could say that, well, that person, for instance, the media center person, they could be on the committee and they could explain what their thought process was and all of that, although I think that could also be done in writing. But we don't allow the person, even though they're a parent in that school, the person that made the complaint, they're not part of the panel. And I think really, if the media center person is going to be there, then I think because they have the most idea of why they allowed that in, I think also that the person that has put forward the complaint, if they would like to do so, I realize they might not, but if they would like to do so because they have the best idea of why they think that material should be removed, then I think they should also be part of that process. And kind of the last thing here, I think it's really important we get this right. I think there's been a lot of positive changes overall. I'm really impressed with it, and I think Doug's done a very good job for the most part of trying to mirror in many cases what the state has said. But with the panels and some other cases, I think as he said, there is some latitude there, and I think, as I said, it's really important we get this right. I still have several concerns about it. I really think that we should either send this back to the committee, and I realize that we would like to get this done in a timely manner, but I think we should either send this back to the committee. I think that probably would be the best thing, the committee that has already been formed to look at this policy, and really go back through it and make sure that we have come up with the absolute best policy that we can at this point. And like I say, I really do think there's some concerns here and there that it would be good to address. Dr. Stiles, thank you very much. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Ms. Brett?
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. So I think you just answered this question, Doug, but so if a book is not immediately taken off the shelves, it remains on the shelves while it's in review, is that right?
That's been the standard practice.
Okay.
That the district has had, and that's how this is drafted, correct? Now, the principal could, let me just say this, if there's a valid question, remove it for the time being until it's answered. So there's some flexibility on that.
So it's kind of up to the discretion of the administration of the school at that point?
Sure.
And then my next question is, once the book has made it through that initial complaint, you had mentioned possibly forming a committee with the board, and the number 3 was thrown out. I don't think that the burden should be on just 3 people within the school board. I think that, 1, that's not a quorum, but 2, I think that it's probably all of our responsibility to take part in that. Can you kind of go back over what you had said about that?
Mr. Webb, before you do that, without objection, we need to extend the time. So if, I think there's several other questions, so we're going to extend it for 20 minutes. Thank you. I apologize, Mr. Webb. Thank you.
So good question. Let me clarify, and I may have misspoke earlier, but if the board were to put in the ad hoc process for formal complaints, it would be a minimum of 3 board members, a minimum. So you could have your own set number, could be 7, could be a number of different scenarios. So that is a possibility for that. So I just want to make sure you realize that is the number would be up to the board, but it would have to at least be 3.
And is that on an as-needed basis, I guess? Are we writing that into the policy that we're going to do that? Like, is that just an idea that we've thrown out now? Or?
No, I mean, and sort of to your question, how I interpret your question earlier, there's some value for all board members being part of that review. So for that purpose primarily, I have not incorporated that ad hoc mechanism into this policy, and instead it would be incumbent on all 12 board members to participate and make a decision collectively.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Brett. At this time, we have Ms. Mosley. She's with us online, and she has a question. Ms. Mosley, can you hear us?
Thank you, Carolyn. Can you hear me?
Yes. Please continue.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to echo what everyone else has said. Thank you so much to Sarah for leading the committee effort to try to streamline and bring this all together. And Doug, especially thank you to you for all the work that went into rewriting and putting this policy into place to comply with state law. Several of my questions have been answered already, but I do have a question that goes back to, so a few years ago, Doug, we had, through the book review process that we've had in place for a while, we had some books come in front of us that had nothing to do with inappropriate content and everything to do with political content or other content where the parent felt like the materials they didn't have a problem so much with the materials as much as there was no balance to balance off the differing of opinions that were presented in the books. Will we follow a similar review process for that type of, I guess, complaint, for lack of a better word?
Yes, so that could still fall under a complaint or a concern raised by it being educationally appropriate or age appropriate. And that would really fall into one of the 5 prongs for criteria to review whether it's educationally suitable. I believe it would fall under C, which talks about the material's validity, accuracy, objectivity. And so I think there's still that avenue. You couldn't look at a viewpoint, but if something's not objective or equal or talks about both sides or this, that, the other, that could certainly be still reviewed under this process.
Okay, I just wanted to get clarification on that since we're speaking more towards, inappropriate material versus just balanced material at this point. Okay, and so then my second question has to go, I understood what Dr. Royster said about the cataloging and auditing process, but to Mr. Cochran's point, I feel like so much of this, I really don't want to put burden on teachers or principals and stuff, so much, or even the board, so much of this could be prevented if we just, prevented it from coming in the door to begin with. So I heard Mr. Cochran speak to what he would like us to do. Can you speak to what we actually are doing as far as our book vendors or just trying to be more proactive versus reactive? I know we have to be reactive to some degree at this point, but going forward to minimize us from even having the material come through the door, particularly at the high school level where I learned in that last review process that young adults is defined differently in the literary world than it is in what I would define a young adult. Does that question make sense?
Yes, let me let Mr. McCoy, you want to speak to that as we significantly revamped the acquisition process?
Yeah, so we have had, excuse me, Ms. Mosley, over the last, 3 years, we've had multiple conversations with book vendors. I think we've had multiple conversations with this board, with Mr. Saylors and some folks about having true book ratings. Books are based on the readability of the book, not the content of the book. So we've had those conversations with publishers, particularly our biggest publishers that we have, or the big vendors, if you will, the biggest book vendors. Their response always been, though, they sell books from hundreds of publishers, so they don't themselves know the content of that. So it's not a matter of the book vendors. It's really, you're talking about going to the individual publishers of the books who actually publish the book to read them. Our book vendors just simply sell the books to us. So they don't have that content, and there's no ratings, obviously, for books right now. So what we put in place currently that we just rolled out, Doug and I, last week, to media specialists is really a process. They have to first look at the state regulation 43170 and make sure that nothing in there would violate that sexual content definition. And then after that, the process for review kicks in. So they would review each book in that series, looking for the book reviews, looking online for content that might not be appropriate for that book. So doing more of a deeper dive into that book to make sure that nothing's going to violate the current regulation, or that it is age appropriate as well, not just readability appropriate, but age appropriate as well. So that's going to have to be more the burden on us, unfortunately, because the book publishers and the vendors currently just don't do that. Now, we are working with Follett, who's our Destiny manager system, so that when we flag a book now that's been removed from the shelf, if someone tries to go to order that book accidentally, they don't realize it's been banned, because that list could get fairly large, it would flag that in the system and say, oh, Greenville County Schools or the state or the school has removed this book. This book's not allowed for purchase. So we're working with them on some things like that to make it a little bit easier, so it's not quite as burdensome. Trying to look at a list of thousands of books that maybe aren't allowed anymore, and trying to figure out which ones can and can't come in. So we're trying to be proactive on the front side of that. The longer conversation is going to be down the road with legislatures and publishers as far as actually putting that content rating, for lack of a better word, like movies do. I think we've talked about that. Right now, there's not been much movement on that in the publishing world, understandably. It's a huge I forget the stats, books are produced at a rate of, I forget how many times the amount movies are produced. So it's a massive undertaking. So right now there's not been movement on that side. So we're working with our folks to put some things on the front side. Follett some vendors have started doing some things called what they call mature tags. So even though something might be readability on the middle school level, where they know the content may not be, or may have some questions, let's say, they can put a mature content tag on that. So that's one of those ones for media, especially, we just say those you just need to avoid altogether. If they put a mature content tag on it, it's not going to be okay. So just avoid that book, or at least that's something you're going to have to read yourself from cover to cover. So there's some things we're making some progress, I would say, on the publisher front, or the book vendor front, shall we say, on that side, Ms. Mosley. So it is for the media specialist, it's going to be a much deeper review process. It's not going to be able to order collections anymore, just a mystery collection. If they order 45 books in a mystery collection, they're going to have to actually look at every single book that's in that collection. So it's just going to take a little bit longer. It's not going to be as quick as a process ordering books in. It's just going to take them a little longer to actually procure and purchase books.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy, for explaining that. It is unfortunate that it is, like you said, such a daunting process, but I do appreciate the fact that we have gotten some additional guidance. We often heard the complaint from the original review committees of some of the books we had back in the end of May, that we need to read the book as a whole to get the context, and not just read excerpts that have been pointed out by some of these resources like Mr. Cochran referenced, book looks, or whatever they are. And yet it seems clear that we don't need to always read the book in the context. We need to read the excerpts and just say yes or no, and I'm based on the guidance now. So I am certainly glad to see that there has been some common sense returned to the table here. Thank you so much for everyone's hard work, and that's all I have. Thanks, Dr. Stiles.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles, and thank you, Doug, for this. And I think that you have explained this. It seems like you keep explaining the same thing over and over, like we have selective hearing. Some do, and that's my opinion. But when I was in Title I, we had to look at research-based programs. And some of these, like book looks and stuff like that from the internet, is sketchy to me. So are we not looking at that whenever we choose these books? Because I know anytime we brought in a program, it had to be research-based. in order for us to be able to pay for it with Title I funding. Are we looking at something like that for it to have a label? I know, what is it, Caldecott books are really the good books that we have a lot in our libraries and stuff, and he's talking about a content rating that, you know, these publishers need to do. But are we looking at something like that maybe in the future? Because I know we have to do it for certain programs. Bert, you might can speak to that.
Yeah, Jeff can speak more in depth about it. You mentioned Caldecott. There's Newbery Award winners. Generally speaking, there are more defined recognitions of quality and appropriate books at the elementary level. There are some awards at the secondary level, but they're not as expansive or pervasive as those awards at the elementary level. And generally speaking, that's where the most questions occur, is at the secondary level, middle school and high school. So finding an objective source out there is extremely difficult. You know, Jeff shared with you all the process we put in place to tighten up the acquisition of materials. You've heard us say before, we've got over 1 million, not 1 million books, 1 million individual titles that we already possess. So that's an extremely challenging task. Most of them have no issue. Some of them, there's been several references made here this morning to decisions a committee made in the past. Well, the committee that existed in the past operated off of a policy that the board adopted, again, originally adopted in the 80s, subsequently revised over the years, but it had a number of caveats in it. This new regulation does not. It's very clear cut. It would appear to be. Now, I'm sure it's going to be challenged. And some of it depends on how you interpret and view the specific language. Going back to some of Ms. Middleton's questions about an anatomy course, a biology course. You know, no one's yet weighed in on this at the state level. There has been no state board decision. No complaint has yet come to them. So we don't know how that might shake out, but in just plain reading of the regulation, it provides for far less discretion to any group. And we do believe that it's important for the group at the school level, because the school level is where the book was selected to begin with. That the people at the school level weigh in on that, and that the principal weigh in on that. That's just one of the many responsibilities of being a principal. There are a lot of challenging responsibilities of that. But I can also speak from having had a decade of experience as a principal. I wouldn't want to defer that decision to someone else. I would want to weigh in on it for the school that I'm charged with leading. Now, somebody may weigh in later and not agree with that decision and may change it. So there's a tremendous amount of work that's going to have to go into this. It's already gone into it, but we'll continue to have to go into it. We don't know how many books teachers have. Because somebody mentioned earlier, it might have been Dr. Presley, made a comment about donating books. People donate books. Bring a big old box of books. Teachers don't generally say, oh, I don't want those books. They take that box of books. For, 20-something years, teachers have been provided funding directly from the state to acquire supplies and materials for their classroom. I think it's up now to $350, $400. So you think about a teacher that's taught a number of years, the number of books they may have acquired over the years. So we are trying to support them in providing these scanners, providing some help to the school to go through and catalog these books, many of which I'm sure or the award winners, particularly at the elementary level that you referenced earlier, Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell. But this is a huge undertaking. We want to make sure that we do it correctly, that we follow the law and the regulation. But again, when you think about all the things a teacher has to do and all the things a principal has to do, all of this is tremendous added responsibility. We certainly need to be diligent in that responsibility, and students do not need to be exposed to things they should not be exposed to. But take a little bit of time to put all of this in place, and within 1 year's time to try to bring forward decisions that were made 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And in most years, our schools are buying, our schools, not just the teachers, our schools, not including what the teachers may buy, tens of thousands of titles. So we certainly want to be very diligent. We want to do the very best that we can possibly do. And we want to try to assist our teachers and our principals with the burden that they have in this, in towards meeting the, what I think is a wonderful objective. But like anything else new, we don't know what all the issues are until someone actually starts implementing it. And that's the case here. I would mention as well, the question was asked earlier about the complaint form. They actually have issued it. It is in your board docs as item 3, I believe, attachment 3.
3 into the policy, correct.
If you want to view that, you can, I don't know if you need to refresh your device or not, but you should be able to view that now.
Should be included in there originally.
Yeah, I remember when I was at the elementary school and we revamped our library, we ordered over 10,000 books just that year alone. But to go back to what you said about what Ms. Middleton said about health education, about I was looking at the statute that the legislature has. Are they going to go back in and revise? They're going to have to, since we now have this standard, which if we would have had it when we got those 4 books, we could have just, turned it around real quick because we would have had that as our guidance. And it's good that we have that guidance now. But with the comprehensive health education program that the legislature has in place, some of the things in there with reproductive health and the comprehensive health, the family life education, some of those things could fall under this also. And I also wanted to, I asked about the classics the other day when we were in the committee meeting. Did we ever get anything? I mean, what if we start, banning Shakespeare and those different classics as far as this is concerned? So I know he said as we go forward, it'll probably be some more guidance on it, but
I don't believe, Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell, that it was anyone's intent to affect the teaching of anatomy or biology. I don't believe necessarily it would have been anyone's intent to ban the works of Shakespeare, as the example you used. But until somebody actually implements and acts under this regulation, you don't know how the body receiving it may interpret it. We just don't know until they act. For years, we have seen things that have happened, and people will come back later and say, well, that was an unintended consequence. So there could very well be unintended consequences that we don't know, because no one has yet ruled on the first, to my knowledge, on the first book. Even at a district level, I've not seen anyone who's at least that we've received word, anyone who's taken an action under this new regulation. So you don't know.
Yeah,
I would hope that if it has unintended consequences, perhaps the examples that you all mentioned, that reconsideration might be given to the wording in it. But Doug will do a better job explaining this than I will, but when you write a law or you write a policy or you write a regulation, it really doesn't matter what your intent is. What matters is what you wrote and the plain language meaning of what you wrote. Would that be a fair assessment, Mr. Webb?
That would be fair. I learned that in law school. Now I will say this: I need to put this out there to make sure you are aware that there is a final provision in the reg that talks about how this regulation does not supersede the Comprehensive Health Education Act, Gavin's Law, and Aaron's Law. Now, again, to Dr. Royster's point, we're talking about the verbiage of one law in comparison to the verbiage of the regulation. There could be a very valid question about the implementation of the Comprehensive Health Education Act and whether that might be in conflict with this regulation. So a lot to be determined down the road.
Yeah, the unintended, like this isn't something new, but we're still reeling from the unintended consequences of Act 388. And I always go back to that. But so, you know, we better be, they need to be careful whenever they start putting this stuff out here for the unintended consequences.
I think at that point too, it might be worthy to note, or as a reminder, because I think you all already know this, Julie might can speak to it better than I can. Because of the timing of this regulation and the ending of the session of the General Assembly, it didn't actually go through the normal review process before the General Assembly. And based on, I won't say a quirk in the, but based on their rules, it went into effect without having gone through what would be the ordinary review process for a regulation. Any state agency that passes a regulation has to submit that regulation through a review process of the General Assembly. There's a timeline for it and a process. And this did not go through that.
So is this regulation?
Excuse me just a moment. Without objection, we'll extend for another 20 minutes. Thank you.
So they're not going through their own rules. It's
No, they followed their rules, and their rules caused it not to go through the normal process. Their rules call for it to go through, if that makes sense.
No, say it again. Say that.
By following their rules, it did not go through the process their rules ordinarily would call it to go through. Because they had a rule that was in conflict with another rule, and the determination was made that this rule superseded the other one.
Okay, that's all I have, Dr.
I'm sorry I couldn't make that any more clear.
You know,
I didn't do a very good job explaining
confusing
that.
information all the time from the legislature down there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. Ms. Leventis Wells?
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. First of all, I would like to say that when we finalize policy KMBA, I really think we need to cover all our bases. And the question on the ad hoc committee would have 3. I think it would be, I think we need to expand that.
So if I could clarify, just to be clear, is that I did not include in the policy, and it's not my recommendation, though it is certainly the board's decision, to include the option of having the ad hoc committee. I agree, if the board were to adopt that possibility, that the number should be higher than 3. But let me be clear, I am not including that ad hoc committee mechanism in this policy. And it's not required by regulation. The regulation allows board trustees to do that, but does not require school boards to implement an ad hoc committee.
Because I mean, when you just talk about 3, that bothers me.
Yeah, well,
I
it would
have
be
major
something higher
concerns
than
over
3.
that. I would like a majority, at least 7 or more. The other question is, I have so many, but Dr. Royster, you just left.
I'll do my best to answer the question,
Okay.
or I'll defer to Mr. McCoy. over
So
there.
I had a school board trustee from Florence send me a book list of 829 books that their district, for the libraries, their districts went through and took the ones that were on that list out of their libraries because they were anywhere from 2 to 5 ratings. And they researched it, and this is a book list that they already have the ratings, they already know exactly what's what, it violates state policy, et cetera. And I'm just thinking, I have this list, and I was gonna forward it to Dr. Royster. It would be so easy because all of these books are in alphabetical order. I've had this list for several days now, and I've looked at it, and you know, it's pretty interesting. And so when we talk about media specialists, I'm trying to minimize their time of going through all this, but it would be so easy since everything is alphabetically done and it's by high school, middle school, elementary. And Dr. Royster, have you seen this list that went to Florence School Board, and Florence County ended up implementing, and they went through and removed the books that were in their libraries? And that's not to say that every one of these books were in their libraries, because they weren't. It could have been a small percentage, but it was a list, and it was easy to detect, and it was easy to implement. So my thing is minimizing time and maximizing resources. So it's very easy to.
No, I'm not familiar with your list. If you'll send it to us, we'll be glad to look at it and
Be
research
glad
it.
to do that. I have it. I was looking at it to make sure that, you know, it's all in place. The other thing is, well, I had lots of questions, but I'm going to try to take care of everything. I want to make sure that when we do vote on this policy, that we do it right, and that we don't have to come back and come back and come back. I mean, when we look that we've extended 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, I don't want to have to go through this again. And when it comes down to books and materials, I don't care if I have to read 100 books. I'm going to do it if it's going to help students and parents, et cetera. I did have one concern, though, when it goes through the process of the principal, and then the principal does this, and then this. I'm going to agree. I can't remember who said it, but I'm going to agree with that process that why would teachers, when the principal said no to this, why put those teachers in that position to go against their principal? I have a real concern with that, because I would think that's not going to happen.
So let me, from my legal perspective, and of course I've been doing this 15, 16 years, so I'm sort of a quasi-educator in some ways, but my view is that a principal is not necessarily saying no. There'll be times, oftentimes, where the principal might say, it's an open question, and I want additional input. I want sounding board. I want more people involved, and let's go through this healthy process. Again, it's limited to 21 days. It's pretty finite prompt, but it creates this measure of review and accountability that, in talking with Mr. McCoy, Dr. Royster, principals, we believe is healthy.
All right, because I understand venting and discussing, but I also understand parents are always trying to make sure that they don't ruffle the feathers of staff and above, because they want their children to do well, okay? So, that's just my point of view and my concern. And if the principal didn't remove the book from the original situation, then why would he do it now? I know, to vent and get other people's opinions. But anyway, I'm trying to be open-minded to that fact. Your presentation, I did have, let's see, process beginning. That is a long process to leave a book on the shelf, 90 days. I feel like if there's a concern, then why leave it on that shelf for 90 days? But that's my opinion, and we know what those are worth.
As it currently stands right now, the administration, Dr. Royster, could remove a book if there's a valid question at that time.
And I'm sure y'all would do that. I know you would. And so the 90 days, that's through the whole process when it goes to the state and then comes back to us? Or what was that little caveat
From the
there?
time that the parent files the formal complaint on the form after the school panel process, when they file the complaint form that has been designated and designed by the State Department of Education, when they submit that, that triggers the 90 days.
So this could have been this could have been a longer period.
Sure. So
It could have been through the appeal process at the school.
as I mentioned, so 90 days kicks in when we get the formal complaint, not the instructional review, just panel
So
form.
that could be another month.
So, and that, you know, I was very cognizant of this being a prompt, timely process. And that's why I limited the school review process to 21 days, pretty quick. And then the state process in its whole is 90 days, but certainly the Board of Trustees can review it prior to the exhaustion of 90 days. It could be 30 days, it could be 60 days. But as I mentioned earlier, time will tell about how long the State Board of Education might take in getting back to our school district, whether they will accept jurisdiction and review. We don't know that. So, you know, you have the flexibility to take the 90 days, but, you know, in many circumstances, I would expect and most likely would move forward well before 90 days.
So it could be anywhere from 111 days to less. And then how many days are in a school year? So then you've gone into another, you're not even going to get through the school year depending on when it took place.
So we're talking about calendar days, just to be clear. And, you know, it is a more defined process than we have currently as far as timeliness. So it's, you know, it's a little bit of a balancing act. There's no doubt about it. What we strive for, and the goal here, is to create a policy and process that is objective, has a lot of due process in it, and review and accountability. Pretty short on the school panel as far as timeline, and of course the 90 days is what's in regulation and is required.
I think another way to look at that and to view that in the framework of the school, because to Mr. Webb's point, it's calendar days, not days we're in school, not weekdays, calendar days. We want them to go ahead and act on it. But if you imagine you got someone brought that concern to you the day before Christmas holidays, then effectively you might have 6 or 8 work days, maybe, to get that done if they brought it to you right before Christmas. If you think about the number of days, including the weekend days over Christmas break, or you think about spring break, or you think about in the summertime, obviously the best thing to do is to get it in, get it handled, and move on. But this gives reasonable flexibility given that it must be calendar days.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leventis Wells. Dr. Presley?
I'm breaking one of my own rules by asking questions twice, but I feel like it's merited. Jeff, is there any protocol or discussion of any protocol in place to minimize duplication of efforts, like what you just described, as far as like if the media specialist happens to go through you know, a set of those books and they do the legwork on that, could it be shared with the others?
Yeah, so there is currently, and we've already started getting them, Ms. Dean in her office, and we've been reviewing. So what we've asked the media specialists to do is when they come across, and we did, Doug and I were very upfront, you know, when we talked to media specialists about existing books, you know, one of the things we've gone through is we've gone back to the books that were challenged previous to these last 4, and we knew there were some books on there we knew were going to violate 43-170, so we just went ahead and already removed those books. We told the media specialists the same thing. You have massive collections. You can't review them all. However, if you know, I mean, because, you know, media specialists are fairly, I mean, they're very knowledgeable about their books, some of the books a lot of times. And we said, if you know that there's books that clearly violate that policy, remove it. Go ahead and remove it. So when they do that, when they remove a book, or the committee removes a book, there is a form that they complete, a Google form, and they actually, the directions down there also say, you know, mark the page and send the page to Tara, and Tara and I look at that, and most of these that we've gotten so far clearly violate the policy. So once that happens, then we send it out, we add it to the list of you know, removed books, challenged books, banned books, if you will. We remove that we put that on the list, and then we email the principal or their designee and the media specialist to say, this has been, you know, removed. Hopefully within the next month, we'll have that process open in Follett, where now we can also tag the book in there, so that the way that works is when you tag a book in Follett that's been removed, a district has removed it, then it sends an email to anybody who has that book. So it'd send an email to the media specialist, send an email to a teacher if there's a classroom library, if they had that in their classroom library book as well. So that's kind of one of the reasons it's important for us to get those tagged as quickly as possible in the classroom, because once we put that process in place, it'll send an email out when something's been removed to everybody who has that book only and say, remove this. And then again, if somebody doesn't realize it's been removed and they go try to order it, it's also going to flag it to say, hey, this has been removed, you can't order this.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Dr. Presley. Any other questions? All right, hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Excuse me, Dr. Strauss, could we do this as a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Ms. Fortner, could we do a roll call vote, please, on this?
Can we do that after we've already taken the voice vote?
I don't believe it's been completed, so yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Brett? Ms. Bush?
Yes.
Mr. Cochran?
No.
Ms. Doolin? Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell?
Yes.
Ms. Levinas-Wells? Ms. Middleton?
Yes.
Ms. Morrison-Fair?
Yes.
Dr. Presley?
Yes.
Mr. Sailors?
Yes.
Dr. Stiles?
Yes.
Nine two.
Vote is 9-2, the motion carries. Again, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Webb for all your work, and Mr. McCoy and Dr. Royster for all the work that you've put into bringing this forward to us, and also a special thank you to Sarah Doolin for leading the ad hoc committee. We appreciate that, Sarah, and to all the members who served on that. We thank you. Our fourth matter of business is administration, and Mrs. Doolin will serve as the chair of this section. Ms. Doolin.
4.01 is the report on summer trainings. I think Dr. Royster has some information for us.
Thank you, Ms. Doolin. I believe Ms. Kapp is going to share with you a presentation. We always like to talk about, just like teachers talking the first day of school with their students, what they do over the summer. We always like to talk about that in the first committee of the whole, and probably extend a little bit into the board meeting. But today is more about summer school for people in the school district. Later on, we'll talk a little bit about the many other tasks that are undertaken by our employees during the summertime to prepare us for the next school year. But today's all about the trainings that we do that include really people throughout the organization and throughout every job classification, whether you're working in building services or food service or clerical, or you're part of the instructional staff or the leadership components of the district. Ms. Cap?
Thank you, Dr. Royster. We appreciate the opportunity to report on our extensive preparation for an impactful school year. Goal 2 of our True North plan is to have a premier workforce. We are committed to an excellent education for every student, provided and supported by exemplary personnel who benefit from intentional induction and support, opportunities for skill advancement, and opportunities to develop their leadership. All of these lead to employee retention and quality results. This morning, I'm going to highlight some of these opportunities aligned to district priorities, most provided through in-house expertise and available in multiple ways. These sessions have been presented by colleagues, district, school personnel, our specialists, and also provided through partners. Our assistant superintendents kick off the summer for their principals, assistant principals, and instructional coaches, supporting collaboration and strong planning for the fall. In 3 seminars, highlights included establishing and clarifying vision and commitments, behavior intervention and support, new teacher retention strategies, and sharing other effective strategies in their buildings. Our summer academy has been long established and is focused on the essential practices to inspire, support, and prepare every student. Across 3 days and nearly 250 sessions, 781 individuals participated, earning 5,725 hours of credit. The next several slides will highlight the sessions with the highest participation in those areas of the instructional protocol. The classroom environment must be conducive to learning and afford every student a sense of belonging and purpose. Nearly 500 participants increased their understanding of essential structures, communication, support, and intervention practices for positive and productive classrooms. In knowledge base, knowing that a teacher must know their content, but also understand the strengths and needs of their students, over 70 sessions supported these essentials, seating nearly 900 participants. Highlights here include various engagement strategies and a focus on power standards. Teachers deepen their ability to assess student progress and fit instruction to challenge and support them. Highlights in the areas of assessment and feedback included using success criteria, analyzing student work, and differentiating instruction and assessment. 36 sessions devoted to instructional delivery included number talks, student choice, and universal design practices to engage all learners. A teacher must plan the path that they intend to reach and teach all students, designing lessons that ensure maximum attainment of content and skills while addressing the needs of each student. 22 sessions supported this effort using GCS curriculum landing pages with a wealth of resources in every content area. Additional summer academy sessions support school leaders and support staff to effectively help our teachers and students. Highlights include coaching conversations and scheduling to support effective co-teaching strategies. Our Upstate Technology Conference was all virtual this year. There were 676 attendees, earning over 3,000 hours credit. This one-day event focuses on effective integration of technology to improve learning. Highlighted were use of Canva for presentation and effective use of artificial intelligence through Magic School AI. Throughout the summer, District specialists and department leaders provide sessions to advance the knowledge and skill of teachers and leaders. These sessions served over 5,100 participants. A favorite was Amira, an audio benchmarking tool for reading. Our robust college and career readiness efforts attracted 183 participants who planned engaging instruction, supported new teachers, and earned credentials to support their work. You will recall our initiative to train all pre-K through grade 3 teachers in the science of reading, a curriculum called LETTERS. 1,200 teachers and administrators completed the first of 8 modules in a 2-year program that will afford the deepest understanding of how students learn to read and the reading and writing practices that will ensure each child does so at high levels. Principals and instructional coaches are also actively planning and developing staff to meet their school's priorities. Nearly 7,500 hours were invested to strengthen professional learning communities, student learning practices, and behavioral structures and support. The summer was a very exciting time for our Elevate schools, Alexander Elementary and Lakeview Middle Schools. Over 130 faculty and staff came together to build a community deeply connected and committed to students, building on their strengths and meeting their needs. Community partners shared resources and perspective in support of student achievement and well-being. Professional learning opportunities are also provided through grants and community partnerships. 42 schools will pair artists with teachers in Smart Arts units this school year, and Buck Institute's training advances project-based learning as well. Many participate in small group book studies, and Clemson University prepared 14 new master teachers to host 5th-year teacher residents. Our 2024 GATE program is supporting 66 new teachers for our classrooms. 3 of these are visual and performing arts teachers, an area we added this school year. In 13 days of this pre-service institute, teachers learn alongside their coach and join others new to their schools for the Induction Institute. Institute strands are listed here, and their training continues across the school year as well. Our Induction Institute provides a strong start and top pay for our teachers. Highlighted here includes targeted learning for those entering the classroom and advancing skill development for those in their 2nd year. Our 18 new international teachers are enjoying robust support as they enter our schools. Welcomed at the airport by schools, principals, and district staff, their orientation extends beyond traditional learning sessions to optional gatherings at the county library, sharing good food, and sharing resources. You can see their impressions here. Those from our different countries who are represented, but all of them speak of the wealth of resources they're excited to use with their students, and many commented how freezing cold it is everywhere they go for their sessions together. There are others in this room who would go along with that.
Go there.
So On Track Greenville, at the very beginning of the school year, hosts faculties and staff members from Tanglewood, Lakeview, Berea Middle Schools, and Berea and Carolina High Schools to support a strong beginning and orientation to resources and opportunities for students. Over 500 attended, and many community partners supported not only resources for students and families, but how to most effectively access and utilize those. Just before students arrive, with all staff back at work, teachers collaborate in district-wide professional learning. Over 3,500 teachers participated in 64 sessions in their first week back, earning nearly 6,000 hours of recertification credit. Sessions included strategies and instructional tools and an all-arts collaboration day. Our building services and maintenance staff set the physical conditions for schools to serve at optimum levels. Not only were they involved in the very important work of preparing over 100 facilities to open in the fall, but they fully reconditioned the 2 Elevate schools so that they welcome those students back to a fresh look, fresh faces, and fresh opportunities in their new school year. Our transportation department recertified over 650 drivers, aides, and substitute drivers. They conducted CDL and driver training for 31 drivers and 12 coaches, and they supported through training bus aides for special needs transportation. You'll see that safety is the greatest focus they are involved with, but also support for students on those buses and building relationships with them. Our Food and Nutrition Services Department conducted Serve Safe Food Handler certification, that is an industry standard, for assistant managers, and then other safety training and back to school in-service for managers and assistants. All of that while serving nearly 53,000 summer breakfast and over 102,000 summer lunches in multiple facilities. You can see the highlights of summer training provided through our human resources, finance, and procurement offices. Over 70 sessions and 1,175 participants. You will see that all of our new folks have much, much to learn, and there are not only group sessions, but one-on-one sessions at school sites to support the understanding and success of new principals, new secretaries, and others in our building. Active shooter training was hosted at Taylor's Elementary School this year, hosting 153 participants. The Greenville County Sheriff's Office co-hosts this training with us, and we ensure understanding in a broad way for our employees for all of the safety protocols that we have in place. A follow-up to that training was the District Emergency Response Team reunification update at a new site that we will use when necessary. Over 131 participants were there. And of course, we were oriented to that particular site, made plans pertinent to that site, and conducted a simulation with role players who arrived by bus from Taylor's Elementary School so that we could go through that full reunification process there in that facility. Annually, we train teacher leaders who provide essential support to early career teachers. The LEAD Institute, a year-round development for aspiring ICs or instructional coaches and administrators, held their first session with 40 participants. The National Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association certification training is held here on site. We serve 27 participants, and they earn certificates in the areas you see listed there. These are national certification trainings. In August, we graduated our first cohort of impact leaders. You will see them pictured there. It was August 9 that they graduated from that 2-year partner selected and tuition assisted cohort through Clemson University. We have now 14 who are entering their internship this fall in their second year, and we just seated 22 more for cohort 3 who will earn that 2-year certification in education leadership and that degree. Our principal induction program is well underway. We held over 4 sessions this summer in full group, and of course, mentors have been working with their partner principals. 9 first-year and new to Greenville County Schools principals were engaged, and you'll see what the summer preparation includes, giving them a strong start to the school year. You may recall that all new principals and those new to the district have a mentor formally for 2 years. And so we have 23 experienced principals continuing in their role, not only growing their leadership, but supporting the leadership of these early career principals in Greenville County. Previously, we shared with you the information about our first cohort of the Executive Leader Institute. We have 17 folks involved in this program, newly hired district leaders, several who have changed their scope or their role, and department managers and principals who aspire to lead at a broader level of impact. This summer provided an opportunity for these folks to meet with a panel of 6 superintendents from across the state. Those folks have provided perspective and encouragement as these leaders advance their skills for executive leadership. Annually, Dr. Royster provides his charge for the school year in an engaging leadership summit. Principals and department leaders address common challenges, applying a strength-based approach, and have refined their attention to the multiple perspectives of the folks that they serve and as they make decisions and make changes in their buildings. All together, we are Team GCS. We invest in people and processes for quality decisions and action. We connect to gain and share perspective, and we empower through communication and capacity building so that we maximize potential in every student. If you have ever wondered why people, thousands of them, with 190 days of assigned work will spend all summer long together learning, planning, and making ready for school, you just need to be in and around our buildings during that first week. These are the reasons these children, their families, and our opportunities to support them are the reason that we do what we do every day. All of the departments in this school district work together to provide engaging and purposeful learning for employees. We are all in for Team GCS and the impact we intend for our students. Dr. Royster?
Certainly answer any question that anyone may have at this point.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I have basically 3 questions. The first one is on the active shooter training. Does that include students when they do the active shooter training?
There were students at the reunification site. They came on the bus from active shooter training at a school site. So I have to say yes, but there were students there.
But they're not.
Most of the folks were adults.
They're not at the schools, which I guess would make it more realistic, but I've also heard that can be very traumatic for students.
To clarify, the training that she's referencing that was presented in the slides has to do with the training of law enforcement to respond to a situation in a school, the coordination between law enforcement and the school district, and also the practice of taking students off-site, students and employees, to a reunification site. So we have traditionally used some number of students who volunteer with their parents' permission to serve as students for purposes of training the adults. That's not our active shooter training that we share with students. That training is conducted in the school, depending on the level of student, in various means, but they do not participate in simulated trainings. They do drills about what to do if something were to happen. But this is a voluntary basis. Both employees that participate, now when I say employees that participate as being people in the school who ultimately get reunified to the reunification site, that sort of thing. Those are employees from various schools throughout the district that volunteer to serve in that role and also to be trained that way.
Right.
So the focus of this training is for adults, and the only student participation is voluntary and with the permission of their parents to participate.
So there is no simulated training, and I did understand that it was a summer thing and for law enforcement to hone their skills, but I wondered if there was any training, and I'm not suggesting there should be, I'm just asking, was there any training where it's more like realistic or more simulated or more, I don't know, some kind of a virtual training of an actual school, of a shooting situation and what students should do and what teachers should do and what they do when they're actually in the building and?
Yes, there is a video
Okay.
that shows that. There is verbal training and direction. What we don't do with students in a building is scenarios to the depth of this one. They'll fire rounds off inside the building. So it's exactly like, obviously they're not live rounds, but they're
right.
The noise, I'm sure you've been part of those simulations. They'll fire rounds off. They'll go through the building. Depending on the training they're actually conducting, they also may fire sim rounds at the shooter, sim being paint tipped rounds, as a part of the law enforcement training. We don't do any of that with students. With students present, this training for students I'm talking about, we don't do anything like that with training for students or where students are the intended audience. The video is, it's not graphic, but it's sufficiently detailed that it sends a strong message, which is what you want to do. You want students and faculty to get a strong message. It's extremely important. This is what you need to do, and this is how you need to do it, and this is why you need to do it. And then they practice that. And in fact, we initiated that well before there was a requirement in the state of South Carolina. And our training for employees and our drills for employees and students exceed the threshold that's required by the state of South Carolina. Because it is, as you know, extremely important that people know what to do when something like that happens. And what people will do is what they've been trained to do, if they've been trained. If they haven't been trained, then they, all bets are off as to what they may do. But most people, they've been trained to do something happens, the muscle memory is going to be, they're going to do what they were trained to do.
Is Greenville County in charge of that training? I mean, do they orchestrate the?
We work jointly with law enforcement, so primarily with the sheriff's office, but there are participants from every one of the municipalities that serve our schools. And sometimes there will be participants from other jurisdictions that come to observe and participate for multiple reasons. One being it helps them hone their skills, and they may be from a smaller department or jurisdiction. And on occasion, they might also be called upon to support local law enforcement. So there's significant planning that goes into all those drills.
But it's fast, right? I mean,
well, it's both fast and slow. They actually start it. It moves extremely quickly. Now, the lead up to it may not be quite as quick because want to go through that, and they may stop them. In a real instant, you're not going to stop people. They may stop them and say, no, you shouldn't do that, you should do this. Because it's a training exercise for them as well. But before they finish, they'll run through the whole thing beginning to end.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know where, Hans may have disappeared, but he was in here earlier.
He just left, yes, sir.
Oh, did he? Okay. Because he's Hans Weinmuller, the lieutenant, one of the lieutenant that works at school enforcement who was in here earlier. He's certainly an active participant in that, in both the planning and the execution of the operation.
Great.
As is Captain Reinhardt.
Second question I had, are teachers required to take training in the summer? Do they have to have so many credits or something?
Some, yes. For example, the letters training, they were required to take that. You may recall you all approved us using some fund balance to pay them to take that training. There might be an issue with an employee where their supervisor may say, you need to take additional training in this related to your performance in that area. That would be another example they're required to do. They're also, this is tangentially a requirement. You're required, if you possess a certificate, every 5 years to get so many hours of training.
Right.
So there are people going to this training voluntarily, but because they need to fulfill the mandated requirement that they get their hours. So they're choosing to do it this way, but they have to get the hours somehow. So you'll have people like that. Now, you also saw a whole bunch of slides of people that they're on the payroll in the summer, and they're going like custodial college for building services. They're 12-month employees. There are things training administrators, training people in finance, that they're on the clock, so to speak. The training hours for bus drivers, they're paid for those hours. Training hours for hourly employees in food and nutrition services, even though they don't work in the summer, they're paid for those training hours. So if you're a classified employee and you're not scheduled to be working during the summer, you'd be paid for the training that you're required to take, because they're required to do that training. Bus driver training and the food and nutrition services training are required.
Okay. Are the teachers paid for taking the training?
Only those that I gave you the examples of, like letters.
That they have to?
We have training for teacher mentors, where they're getting a stipend to be a mentor. So in essence, that's part of the pay they're receiving to be a mentor. I guess theoretically, the coaches, they're getting a supplement to coach. So while it certainly doesn't equate to the number of hours they put in, they're getting some amount of pay. Our athletic directors get a supplement as well. And we require our athletic directors to become NIAAA certified. But they have to have that licensing process, where Darryl is, they have to have been working 3 years before they can, starting into their third year, before they can actually begin the certification process. But our requirement is that all of our athletic directors become NIAAA certified, which is the National Organization for Athletic Administrators.
Final question. Little off topic, but you mentioned international teachers coming and training and all that. Whatever happened, or how are we doing with the Blythe Academy of Languages? Did we ever get somebody to teach those French classes?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have no current teacher vacancies in the district, unless somebody quit while we were in here.
So we're good, right?
We're good, but as you all well know, 6,000 teachers, unfortunately, things come up, and some teachers perhaps have to resign during the year. Their spouse is transferred, or they have illness or other circumstances in the family. But starting school, we were 100% staff through the methods we described to you in the information that we sent you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Where do I begin? I'm so excited. I went to 11 schools yesterday, And all of them, the schools were absolutely filled with excitement, fully staffed, and Custodio did their jobs. Maintenance did their jobs, and I didn't have any complaints on the buses. There might have been a little niche on one, but when you think of 11 schools and there was only one, and they said, and it was very minor. I have never been so excited about going the first week, the first day of the first week of school, and going into these schools, and these principals are so excited, and their staff were phenomenal in 10 of them. It was just phenomenal. And I'll just tell you, I think it was it at Summit? I think I went to Summit. I think it was Summit when I went in and they were talking about this new, what is it? The way they were serving the food, and it was this new project. It was this new, I looked at that food and I thought, oh man, I could eat this. I could eat it. It looked so appetizing and so exciting, and the kids were just so happy. And it was smiling faces all the way around. The principals were phenomenal. Fine Arts Center was incredible. I was so excited that I took the time to go to all those schools and see everybody, and they were as excited to see me. So thank you for a job well done, and thank you for preparing everyone for their new positions. There was one school that had an aide, and they're hoping to work with him to get him through the PACE program. I think it's the PACE program, to get him where he can be in the classroom. But he was phenomenal too. So it was just a great day. I mean, I got home and my husband goes, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "It was a great day."
Wanted to go back, didn't you?
Yeah, so exciting. And I said, I hope, and one more thing, the cell phones, it's a good thing we're taking them out, because it makes a difference. It truly makes a difference. And one principal said, you know what, it alleviates the drama, and all the other stuff that goes with it. And then one principal said, we did away with that several years ago. And I said, good for you. So good for y'all. Thank you so much for preparing them and getting them ready for the first day and the first week. And hopefully it will be a fantastic school year.
Thank you for those remarks. And you recall, there's a whole lot of people involved.
I know. I was trying to cover some of them, but
tremendous level of commitment.
I'm looking at all the ones that, you talked about, the executive leadership and all of this, and I know the new principals, getting them ready, and I'm just beside myself with excitement. Thank you. That's it.
We talk, thank you very much, and this is always one of the great reports that I look forward to every year. We talked previously in the subject we covered before this about unintended consequences, and we see such a perfect example with this of intended consequences. As Ms. Levinas-Wells just described, all of this effort, all of these hours, all of this training, the intended consequence was what a lot of us observed. Less, I would say a decade back or more, I used to dread the week that school started, because I got so many, I just kind of cleared my work schedule, my actual work schedule, although sometimes I doubt which one I put the most hours into, but I would clear that out because I had to make myself available for all the calls that I would get about, I don't like this teacher, I don't like this principal, he didn't greet me at the door, she didn't do this. I don't know I didn't get a list of what my kids are supposed to have. I got the list. I don't like it. The bus, I don't know what bus my child rides. And so this is absolutely amazing that I've seen this transition of customer satisfaction. And that's basically what it is. When I look at at my business in retail, that this is true, absolute customer satisfaction. And you have to train your employees to have that culture and to have the resources. I know that we have never put a dollar on this, but is there a way, because its value is priceless as to what it returns, but I would think that as a culture and as a recruiting tool, because when many times on a state level, when I have shared this, what we do in the summer with other board members and other districts, they are absolutely blown away at what we have to offer. And many times, and even with teachers, they say, could we pay to be a part of that? How could we take advantage of that? But the just the value and the investment that's put into this, to our professional development and our dedication to not, as we recruit new teachers and hire new teachers, that we don't only want to hire the best, we want to continue, that Greenville County Schools invest this much hours and this much money, whether you're a bus driver, a food service, a teacher that maybe is thinking about going into leadership, that it would be a recruiting effort to say, that would be a big package to me as a young person, deciding it might be that I could go to this district and make $500, $800, $1,000 more. But what does this district have in the way of professional development that will offer me the opportunity that, as I consider a future in education, that I'm going to be trained, or that I could drive a bus driver in this county, but I could also go over here, and this is the training and the investment that this district sees in me. So I don't know if that's something, do we use that as a recruitment tool, the professional development?
Yeah, if you follow particularly some of the social media posts that the HR recruiting people do, they promote a lot of, they'll go out and take pictures of, there were a bunch of them ran, I guess, the last probably 3 or 4 weeks. Angela Jarecki particularly, because she's very prolific on social media. You all probably seen her, the stuff out there she puts out there. And a lot of that would be, all right, well, here's a picture of this group doing this. So sending that message out there that way. So they do use it. Not saying we couldn't do more of that. And one of the discussions we had with principals this summer at the Superintendent's Leadership Institute is doing a better job of getting some of that information out directly from schools, not just from the district, because obviously our ability here from communication staff we has limits to it, just like anything else we do. That multiplies our ability to do that. As far as looking at the costs, there are some direct costs with this, and we know what those are because they come over staff development budgets. But the greatest bulk of what we spend on this is not a direct cost. And we could probably estimate that. It's the indirect cost when you think about the custodial staff, for example. If you go to custodial college, that's it's got 750, 800 employees or more.
All total, we're about 800. I'd say we're somewhere around 650 with custodians.
So you got 800 employees that are spending at least a day, some cases more, plus the ones conducting it. So you can think of the payroll for 800 employees for a day, but we're investing that amount of money to make them more efficient and more effective in their work day, the days they're not in training. So it's what we believe, a great trade-off, but there's a cost there, just like there's a cost for the bus driver. Is probably a little bit easier to calculate because we're paying them by the hour for a day they're not necessarily already working or fans. But if you think about a day of a teacher's pay, that they're giving their time to be trained, and Jeff's employees, predominantly in Summer Academy, those would be people in academics, as well as principals and teachers from throughout the district that are teaching those courses. So that's a significant investment for depending on what year it is, the 3 or 4 days that has run. So there's a huge investment in people's time that obviously translates into dollars, but we believe it's, again, an investment in improving the quality of services we can provide and also making people's jobs easier. If you're learning a better way to do something, it's making your job easier.
Yes, I definitely agree with the let's work smarter, not harder. And do you need to extend the time? Go ahead.
Thank you. Without objection, can we extend the time for 5 minutes, please?
I would also, on the active shooter, I do have a couple of things. I know that this year we have added a second site on the active shooter for the reunification.
Oh, it's actually a third site,
Third
but
site?
yes.
Okay, and making sure that that parents, and not just parents, but I would say that community members, because I would imagine that if a grandparent, you're going to have multiple family members that if they hear something's happening at a school, that uncle and grandma and multiple people are going to be headed. And I know that it's logical to sit in a boardroom or to sit through a drill and to think through, but when you have all those people trying to come to when they've heard quickly through social media now, something's happening at the school, if there is truly something that could injure children and you needed emergency vehicles there, how important it is for them to realize, those family members, not to try to go to that school. And I know that just as a parent or a grandparent, that's your first instinct, is to get to where I know that my child is safe. But the importance that community members and people have, that like, oh, well, my next door neighbor's child, I'm going to take off down there because I'm closer to the school and I know she works in Simpsonville. So, those type of things of critical communication, that you head to that reunification site is the most important thing that a community member or a family member can do to keep those emergency vehicles, whether it be law enforcement or ambulances or whatever, the ability to get to that school. I know we faced that issue before with Southside, and we faced it with Tanglewood. So.
And to your point, certainly we want to communicate that as quickly as we can. But there are also considerations. For example, and you gave two examples. In one case, we did not move students from that building. The reunification occurred on site. So that's a call that would be made by law enforcement working with us, depending on what the incident is. Part of what they're going to do in their response, without getting into the details of that, is they're going to set up a perimeter. People are not going to be able to get to the school. So going there would not be something we'd want people to do, unless what we would rather they do, which is very hard for people to do, and I understand that, wait until we can give them some information about what's about to happen. The other thing is we don't want them showing up at a reunification site before our folks have shown up there to set it up so it can be conducted in an organized and well-managed manner, which means there has to be a law enforcement response to that reunification site. And we have those arrangements with agencies other than that which would be the primary responder to the particular school. Depending on the emergency, that might determine what site or sites are used. It might not necessarily be the one physically closest to the incident. For example, an incident we had a number of years ago had to do with the concern of a chemical leak. In that case, based on where that leak was, we probably would not have used the site that we drilled at this summer because of its proximity to the actual incident. So all of that, sometimes it seems like it happens slowly, it happens relatively quickly, considering all the other things that are going on at the same time. So the message that we would hope that we're getting out, and we'll try to improve our means of getting that out, despite understand the concern and the desire to know, but if you'll give us a chance to get it organized and tell you where they'll be, that will be your quickest route to be reunified with your child or with the faculty or staff, because we're going to transport everybody out of there, including all the employees, unless there is a reason we need for one or two of them to stay behind to provide information, which generally would be an administrator.
Thank you, and thank you, and thank you again to all the people that participated in the training, all the people that went for the training, because my number one disliked urban legend that goes around out there is, in my next life, I'm going to be a teacher, or I'm going to work for the school district, because they get the whole summer off. So every opportunity I get to be able to share this report for people and direct them to go to this report so that they can see that if that's the reason that in their next life they're going to choose to work for Greenville County Schools, then they need to know what's happening during the summer. So thank you very much.
That concludes the administration portion of this meeting. So Dr. Stiles.
Thank you so much, Ms. Doolin, for chairing administration. We're going to move on to building and grounds, and I'm going to ask Ms. Morrison-Fair to serve as the chair. Ms. Morrison-Fair?
I can't hear.
Turn your mic on.
I'm sorry. Oh, I said that we have 5 items on the building and grounds, and so we will start with 5.01, property acquisition for Northwest Middle School. Oh, that's executive session. I'm sorry.
Well, if I might, Ms. Morrison-Fair.
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Items 5.01, 5.02, 03, and 04
Right.
are all executive session if you wish to discuss them today. But as a reminder, every one of those items we're simply bringing to you today at the Committee of the Whole. Your final decision on those would be made at the board meeting, and we would discuss them in executive session prior to the board meeting. But certainly, if you wish to go into executive session to discuss any one of those today, you could do that. We actually can take these directly to the board, but we generally like to bring them to you at the Committee of the Whole, just so you have the information for an extra period of time. And having said that, I will also, for the record, recuse myself from 5.01. Mr. Davey will have the point for the administration on that. That has to do with property acquisition, and one of the entities involved in the development of the parcels of property of which this is a part is one of my college roommates. Though I have no monetary interest in his business, I didn't feel it appropriate for me to participate in detail in this matter. And so I've recused myself from it, and I'll excuse myself for whatever discussion you might have or presentation. But because the Randolph Group is involved in this matter to a degree, I will recuse myself at this time, and you all can let me know when you finish that part.
All right, since we've heard that explanation on 501, 502, and 503, do we have any speakers to those 3 items?
Madam Chairman.
Mrs. Bush, I'll recognize you.
I would like to move to approve the purchase of 29.22 acres of property necessary for the replacement of the existing Northwest Middle School.
Madam Chairman, I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the purchase of 29.22 acres of property necessary for the replacement of the existing Northwest Middle School. All those in favor?
Discussion.
Excuse me?
I have a question first.
All right. All those in favor?
No.
No.
Discussion,
Okay,
then question.
All right, question.
I will have questions in executive session, so can we put that, I don't need it today, we don't have to break today, but can we put that on the agenda for our executive session before our board meeting?
Yes, so,
Okay,
and you could, as a board, vote to move it to the full board, even though you don't have to. Like Dr. Royster said, the administration could have brought this directly to the board, but you could take a vote just to formally move it. You would still have the executive session prior to the meeting in 2 weeks regarding this.
Otherwise, a vote is to pass it right now today.
No.
We're voting just to.
Okay.
Just go to the board.
That was my question, clarification, Doug. The action we take today on any of these items that are related to a potential executive session conversation are simply to move it from the committee of the whole to the board, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, perfect.
All right. Yeah, are there any other questions or clarifications? Do you need to go into?
No, unless somebody.
Okay.
She was asking.
Ms. Bush?
Yes, I just wanted to say, through this process, I appreciate that, that Dr. Royster has brought this to the board, because it will give us the opportunity, if we can pass this today, we're you know, through no fault of the administration or the board, we're already way behind on this project. And, you know, so representing this school and this community, people are getting really like, when is it going to happen? Is it, now they're beginning to doubt, is it even going to happen? So hopefully if we can pass this today, I would ask for your support in getting this to the next meeting. And then especially if there are any questions, that don't hold those, because if you have any questions, I would hope that you would submit those to the administration. That way it's on our list for the next meeting. It's on our agenda, so that those can be answered, and that hopefully by the actual board meeting, if you wait till then and ask, then it's just going to delay this project even more. And so I'm hoping that this will be able to advance us and get us back into the swing of things and get this project underway. So as a process, I appreciate this, because otherwise, if it came up just at a board meeting and then people had questions, it could delay it again to another board meeting, which would be another month down the road. So that was all I had.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments? All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Are you prepared to vote on item 5.01? All those in favor, please make your sign by vote of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, 5.01 passed, and I'd just like to make a comment, Ms. Bush. I saw your little antennas go up. I know you've been pushing for this at least as long as I've been on the board. So I know it's near and dear to the people who you represent.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is 5.02, selection of the electrical engineering firms to provide professional services.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Sellers.
I'd like to make the motion to approve the firms 1 and 2 to provide electrical engineering professional services for the school district.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve firms 1 and 2 to provide electrical engineering professional services for the school district. Are there any questions or comments?
Question.
Mr. Sellers?
Scott, we only had 2 responsive vendors, or you only looked for 2?
We had 4 responses, and after the interviews, they decided to select 2 based on the
That's
needs.
fine. Just clarification. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of 5.02, selection of electrical engineering firms to provide professional service. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, that has passed, 5.02, and we move to 5.03. Selection of mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering firms to provide professional services. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Sellers.
I'd like to move to approve the highest ranked 5 firms to the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering, professional services for the school district.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the floor. Any comments or questions? I don't see any comments or questions. Those prepared to vote, please vote by sign of saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, nay. Okay, 5.03 has passed. The next is 5.04, Duke Energy Carolinas. Let me pull this up, please. And that is to approve the requested perpetual utility easement at A.J. Wittenberg Elementary School.
Madam Chairman.
Dr. Royster, would you like to make any comments on that first?
Only that we recommend that approval, and there is a benefit to the district for additional lighting. That driveway terminates at Wittenberg Circle, the back of the school. So though we would recommend it likely without that benefit, it does provide a benefit to the school.
Okay. Mr. Carlin, would you like any comments?
No, ma'am.
All right, any comments or questions from the board?
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move to approve the request for a perpetual utility easement at A.J. Wittenberg Elementary School as requested.
Second. All right, I have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, aye, please.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Okay, 5.04 has passed, and we move to the last, the facilities project report. Dr. Royster, you have any comments?
No, be glad to answer any question the board might have. Our summer work has proceeded generally as we expected it, with the exception I think we've already made you aware of we've had difficulties with completing our painting based on bid challenges and contractor performance. But we have plans already in place to get those things back on track, and we're moving forward with that.
Okay, Mr. Carlin, any comments?
No, ma'am.
All right, I have a motion and a second on the floor. Comments from the board?
There's no motion, it's information only.
Excuse me? Oh, information only, okay.
Mr. Carlin, or Colonel Carlin, sorry. How is Lakeview looking? I know there were some setbacks as far as paint and things like that. How are we doing over there?
Well, if this was about 2 weeks ago, I'd have a very different answer for you, but I think it's looking very good right now.
Yeah, I was a little concerned too.
Yeah, as Dr. Royster said, we've had challenges with that particular job and that contractor, but we're getting them back on track schedule-wise, and the visual appeal of the school interior is night and day what it was from about 2 weeks ago, and we're pretty pleased with it.
So this group that dropped the ball, have we noted not to use them again?
We don't, we need to be careful how we speak to that.
Yeah.
We have issues with contractors. We do the documentation that's required, and if their failure to perform rises to a particular level, then we have the ability to exclude them from further bidding on district jobs.
Okay, well, I appreciate that.
But we can follow up with you on that later, but it wouldn't be appropriate to speak to it at this moment.
Thank you, Dr.
Yes, ma'am.
Royster, and I appreciate that. It's just because of their delays, it affects our students, and that's where I'm concerned.
Yes. And although Colonel Carlin didn't mention it specifically, we required them to augment their forces with another paint contractor, as well as he utilized our own maintenance forces up to and including, I think, spending until about 1 o'clock in the morning over there with a pretty large crew the day before school started to ensure that to the best of our ability, we could bring it up to the appearance that we wished for it to have, given the issues that we'd had.
Thank you for that. I will say the schools that I attended were all excited about the preparation and the completion of everything that y'all did for them. So thank you very much.
Yes,
No
ma'am.
further questions.
Mr. Cochran?
Thank you. I was just wondering on several of the, especially elementary school additions, the project status is currently listed as substantially complete. I'm just wondering what else remains at those schools to get them from that category to just being completed?
So that's a good question, Mr. Cochran. Certainly with any major construction project, you're going to have a period where you obtain beneficial occupancy, so you can start using it. But it is not uncommon to have punch list items that still have to be corrected. They're still working the mechanical system to get it just right with commissioning and things like that. So there are punch list items that are going on all 5 of the elementary addition projects that are going on now in varying degrees of completion, but we hope to have most of those corrected by the end of the month.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Morrison-Fair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cochran. Miss Michelle Goodwin-Cole.
On the renewals, the track and the tennis.
Yes, ma'am.
Renewals, are they on a rotation?
They are.
So it's a certain, how many years?
3-year rotation.
It's 3-year rotation?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that, so that's how those schools are chosen for?
Yes, ma'am.
For this?
All of them are on a 3-year rotation with their tracks, tennis courts.
Okay. That's all. That's all.
And Dr. Presley?
Quick question, Colonel Carlin, what is the status of the drainage issue at the J.L. Mann High School football field? Is that secure and are they ready to go? I see they have a first game is away and then their second one's at home.
Yes, ma'am. Drainage corrections were made to the field this summer. Sod has been placed. We should be good to go for their first home game. Don't anticipate any problems.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
As a reminder, we're researching the viability of artificial turf for a playing surface at each of the 15 high schools. The manner in which the drainage was addressed at J.L. Mann, if we were to decide to recommend to you all and you all approved artificial turf, that drainage is set up that it would accept that turf without there being an issue. It's placed correctly to do that. They did not go back and recrown that field or redirect all the water on it, but put enough drains in to sufficiently drain it. But again, they were installed in such a way that if we decide to go in there later and recrown that field, if we don't put artificial turf on it, that drainage system will not have to be redesigned or removed. So it's good, should be good to carry them until the board makes some decision regarding the future of artificial turf, or we believe if the decision is not to go with artificial turf, to do some additional work on that field that we would do at a later time. And I believe it also gave them a little more width, Colonel.
It provided a more gradual slope on the visitor side, so they should be able to play on a wider field.
Not a full 60 yards.
Not a full 180, but certainly more.
Hope for, but some additional distance.
Thank you, Mrs. Morrison-Fair. This concludes our committee of the whole meeting for the day. I need a motion to adjourn. Ms. Leventis Wells has made a motion. Ms. Doolin has made a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. This concludes our committee of the whole meeting at 11:48. We also have a special call meeting immediately following, and I'm going to go ahead and call our special call meeting to order. And at this time, I need a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters and receive information on economic development.
Dr. Stiles, I make the motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters and to receive information on economic development.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move to conference room A.
Second.
Oh, excuse me, and we need a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. At this time, we'll move to conference room A, and please get your lunch before you go inside. Thank you.
You better get more than the cake. You ready? Oh, okay, keep going, buddy. Let me know how that works out for you.
I'm going to call us back to order, and I want to inform everyone present that we just left executive session to discuss personnel matters and to receive information on economic development. No votes were taken. We have a recommended motion from administration to approve the personnel recommendations as presented. I need a maker of the motion.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the recommendation as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors, and Ms. Leventis Wells has made a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion carries. Our second executive session agenda item, economic development, was for information only and requires no action. Do I have a motion to go out of executive session and conclude our special call meeting?
Madam Chairman, I move, we're out of executive session, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Adjourn.
I second.
Okay, all right. We have a motion from Mr. Sailors and a second from Mrs. Leventis Wells. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion carries. We are adjourned at 12:45 p.m.